Summary time. If you want to read along, we are on chapter 12. I believe the exclamation, the command in the chat, exclamation, read along, I think. Yes, thank you, Uga. Exclamation, read along, if you would like to read along. We're on chapter 12. Just use the index on that PDF. Click on chapter 12, and it will take you to chapter 12. It's amazing technology. If you want to catch up, exclamation, read along. That's the link to a PDF of the whole book on the internet. If you want to read the previous chapters, if you want to listen to the previous chapters, I have a whole playlist on my channel of the previous chapters. We're currently on chapter 12. I do not know how to summarize this book for you if you're just getting here, but I'll try. Chat can help a little. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Set in a semi-futuristic society. I say semi because it was written in 1932. So futuristic from that point of view. I think of this as a complementary counterpart to George Orwell's 1984. Two sides of the same coin, if you will. If you loved 1984, you're gonna hate Brave New World. I'm joking. I usually find that some people like one more than the other, and that's why I'm reading this one. I feel like most people don't like Brave New World, or like most people like who read 1984 and like read it in like a day. They just can't get through this for some reason. I don't know. And then some people are the opposite. I read this in 3 days. The first time. It's taken me about a year now. But I read this in 3 days the first time, and it took me like 7 years to finish 1984. So after this, should we go on to read 1984? Fuck. Ignore that. Ignore that. I've already read 1984 on stream. That's also in my playlist. I've already read 1984. Thank you, Uga. That is exclamation 1984 will give you the playlist. What about Fahrenheit 451? You know, I have thought about that. That was one... Okay, everybody says that they read this, or they read Slaughterhouse-5, or they read 1984 in their school curriculum. The only one that I read when I was in school, like, because of school, was Fahrenheit 451, and I really enjoyed that book. But that's the only one that I'm like, oh yeah, we read that in school. Have you read Manufacturing Consent? No, but I watched the documentary. High five. I only recall Lord of the Flies. Oh yeah, well everybody read Lord of the Flies. 8th grade, right? Oh, shush. How do I summarize this so far? Brave New World. It's a Brave New World. It's set in 160-something AF, which stands for After Ford. It's a society that worships Ford Motors. Ford Motors. They really like Ford trucks. American made. All things under the sun are made in an assembly line. Babies, food, helicopters. You know, the three main industries. They're all made on assembly lines. And the main characters in this book are all assembly line workers. The Jungle by Sinclair. All the main characters that we follow work in one factory. It's the baby factory. There's Bernard and Lenina, a man and a woman. Bernard likes Lenina. Lenina likes Bernard. That's all you need to know. All right, I think we're warmed up. I think we're ready for chapter 12. No, fuck. Okay, there's another character. That reminds me. Content warning. Racism. Mature topics. Okay, there is another character named John. John the Savage. He was born on a savage reservation in a savage tribe. And his name is John. And he has been brought to the other world, the new world. From the savage world to the brave new world. He likes Shakespeare for some reason. I'm tired already. Oh my god. Bernard brought him back from the reservation, and now John's a celebrity because he's so weird. Oh, and both of his parents are from the New World, except his mom, she got pregnant, which is like a dirty word in this society, as well as mother and father. There are no mothers and fathers when everybody's born in a test tube on an assembly line. So, John was actually birthed out of the vagina. John was birthed out of a vagina on a savage reservation. And then Bernard found him and brought him back and was like, hey boss, is this your son? I hope you guys followed that. It's great. There's so much drama. You have no idea. This would make a great TV show. God damn it. I hit the cord. Yeah, and then his boss pooped his pants. His own pants. Chapter 12. Bernard had to shout through the locked door. The savage would not open. But everybody's there, waiting for you. Let them wait, came back the muffled voice through the door. Let them wait. But you know quite well, John, how difficult it is to sound persuasive at the top of one's voice. I asked them on purpose to meet you. You ought to have asked me first whether I wanted to meet them. But you always came before, John. That's precisely why I don't want to come again. Just to please me, Bernard bellowingly wheedled. Won't you come to please me? No. Do you seriously mean it? Yes. Despairingly. But what shall I do? Bernard wailed. Go to hell, bawled the exasperated voice from within. But the Ark Community Songster of Canterbury is there tonight. Bernard was almost in tears. Aya Takwa. It was only in Zuni that the savage could adequately express what he felt about the ARC community songster. Hani, he added as an afterthought. And then, with what derisive ferocity, Sons esse cena, and he spat on the ground, as Pope might have done. In the end, Bernard had to slink back, diminished, to his rooms, and inform the impatient assembly that the savage would not be appearing that evening. The news was received with indignation. The men were furious at having been tricked into behaving politely to this insignificant fellow with the unsavory reputation and the heretical opinions. The higher their position in the hierarchy, the deeper their resentment. To play such a joke on me, the ARC songster kept repeating. On me. As for the women, they indignantly felt that they had been on false pretense, that they had been had on false pretense. Had by a wretched little man who had had alcohol poured into his bottle by mistake. By a creature with a gamma minus physique. It was an outrage, and they said so, more and more loudly. The headmistress of Eton was particularly scathing. Lenina alone said nothing. Pale, her blue eyes clouded with an unwonted melancholy, she sat in a corner, cut off from those who surrounded her by an emotion which they did not share. She had come to the party filled with a strange feeling of anxious exultation. She sat in a corner, cut off from those who surrounded her by an emotion which they did not share. She had come to the party filled with a strange feeling of anxious exultation. In a few minutes, she had said to herself as she entered the room, I shall be seeing him, talking to him, telling him, for she had come with her mind made up, that I like him more than anybody I've ever known. And then perhaps he'll say, what would he say? The blood rushed to her cheeks. Why was he so strange the other night, after the feelies? So queer. And yet, I'm absolutely sure he really does rather like me. I'm sure. It was at this moment that Bernard made his announcement. The savage wasn't coming to the party. Lenina suddenly felt all the sensations normally experienced at the beginning of a violent passion surrogate treatment. A sense of dreadful emptiness, a breathless apprehension, a nausea. Her heart seemed to stop beating. Perhaps it's because he doesn't like me, she said to herself. And at once this possibility became an established certainty. John had refused to come because he didn't like her. He didn't like her. It really is a bit too thick, the headmistress of Eton was saying to the director of crematoria and phosphorus reclamation. When I think that I actually... Yes, came the voice of Fanny Crown. It's absolutely true about the alcohol. Someone I know knew someone who was working in the embryo store at the time. She said to my friend, and my friend said to me, too bad, said Henry Foster. sympathizing with the ARC community songster. It may interest you to know that our ex-director was on the point of transferring him to Iceland. Pierced by every word that was spoken, the tight balloon of Bernard's happy self-confidence was leaking from 1,000 wounds. Pale, distraught, abject, and agitated, he moved among his guests, stammering incoherent apologies, assuring them that the next time the savage would certainly be there, begging them to sit down and take a carotene sandwich, a slice of vitamin, a pâté, a glass of champagne surrogate. They duly ate, but ignored him, drank and were either rude to his face or talked to one another about him, loudly and offensively, as though he had not been there. "And now, my friends," said the ARC community songster of Canterbury, in that beautiful ringing voice, which he led the proceedings at Ford's Day celebrations. "Now, my friends, I think the time has come." He rose, put down his glass, brushed from his purple viscous waistcoat the crumbs of a considerable collation, and walked towards the door. Bernard darted forward to intercept him. "Must you really, ARC songster? It's very early still. I'd hoped you would." Yes, what hadn't he hoped? When Lenina confidentially told him that the ARC community songster would accept an invitation if it were sent. "He's really rather sweet, you know." And she had shown Bernard the little golden zipper fastening in the form of a T, which the ARC songster had given her as a memento of the weekend she had spent in Lambeth. To meet the ARC community songster of Canterbury and Mr. Savage. Bernard had proclaimed in his triumph on every invitation card. But the Savage had chosen this evening of all evenings to lock himself up in his room, to shout "Hani!" and even, it was lucky that Bernard didn't understand Zuni, "Sons eso sena." What should have been the crowning moment of Bernard's whole career had turned out to be the moment of his greatest humiliation. I cannot guarantee correct pronunciation. It was lucky that Larrybug didn't understand Zuni. What was meant to be the crowning moment of Bernard's whole career had turned out to be the moment of his greatest humiliation. "I'd so much hoped," he stammeringly repeated, looking up at the great dignitary with pleading and distracted eyes. "My young friend," said the ARC community songster in a tone of loud and solemn severity. There was a general silence. "Let me give you a word of advice." He wagged his finger at Bernard. "Before it's too late. A word of good advice." His voice became sepulchral. "Mend your ways, my young friend. Mend your ways." He made the sign of the T over him. And turned away. "Lenina, my dear," he called in another tone. "Come with me." obediently but unsmiling, and wholly insensible of the honor done to her, without elation, Lenina walked after him, out of the room. The other guests followed at a respectful interval. The last of them slammed the door. Bernard was all alone. Punctured, utterly deflated, he dropped into a chair and, covering his face with his hands, began to weep. A few minutes later, however, he thought better of it and took 4 tablets of soma. Upstairs in his room, the savage was reading Romeo and Juliet. Shit! I really gotta stop hitting that chord. Sorry. He shouldn't read that, it's bad for you. Okay, well, upstairs, the savage was reading Romeo and Juliet in his room. Lenina and the Ark community songster stepped out onto the roof of Lambeth Palace. Out onto the roof of Lambeth Palace. "Hurry up, my young friend. Lenina," called the Ark's songster impatiently from the lift gates. Lenina, who had lingered a moment to look at the moon, dropped her eyes and came hurrying across the roof to join him. We're doing jump cuts. You know. A New Theory of Biology was the title of the paper which Mustafa Mond had just finished reading. He sat for some time, meditatively frowning, then picked up his pen and wrote across the title page. The author's mathematical treatment of the conception of purpose is novel and highly ingenious, but heretical, and so far as the present social order is concerned, dangerous and potentially abusive. Subversive. It is dangerous and potentially subversive. Not to be published. He underlined the words. The author will be kept under supervision. His transference to the Marine Biological Station of St. Helena may become necessary. A pity, he thought, as he signed his name. It was a masterly piece of work. But once you began admitting explanations in terms of purpose, well, you didn't know what the result might be. It was the sort of idea that might easily decondition the more unsettled minds among the higher castes. Make them lose their faith in happiness as the sovereign good, and take to believing instead that the goal was somewhere beyond, somewhere outside the present human sphere, that the purpose of life was not the maintenance of well-being, but some intensification and refining of consciousness, some enlargement of knowledge, which was, the controller reflected, quite possibly true, but not in the present circumstances admissible. He picked up his pen again, and under the words, "not to be published," drew a second line, thicker and blacker than the first, then sighed. What fun it would be, he thought, if one didn't have to think about happiness. With closed eyes, his face shining with rapture, John was softly declaiming to vacancy. Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheeks of night like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear, beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. The golden tea lay shining on Lenina's bosom. Sportively, the Ark community songster caught hold of it. Sportively, he pulled. I think, said Lenina suddenly, breaking a long silence, I'd better take a couple grams of soma. Bernard, by this time, was fast asleep, smiling at the private paradise of his dreams. Smiling. But inexorably, every 30 seconds, the minute hand of the electric clock above his bed jumped forward with an almost imperceptible click. 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 And it was morning. Bernard was back among the miseries of space and time. It was in the lowest spirits that he taxied across to his work at the conditioning center. The intoxication of success had evaporated. He was soberly his old self. And by contrast with the temporary balloon of these last weeks, the old self seemed unprecedentedly heavier than the surrounding atmosphere. To this deflated Bernard, the savage showed himself unexpectedly sympathetic. "You're more like what you were at Malpai," he said when Bernard told him his plaintive story. "Do you remember when we first talked together? Outside the little house? You're like what you were then." "Because I'm unhappy again, that's why." "Well, I'd rather you be unhappy than have the sort of false, lying happiness that you were having here." "I like that," said Bernard bitterly. "When it's you who are the cause of it all, refusing to come to my party and turning them all against me." He knew that what he was saying was absurd in its injustice. He admitted inwardly, and at last even out loud, the truth of all that the savage now said about the worthlessness of friends who could be turned upon so slight a provocation into persecuting enemies. But in spite of this knowledge and these admissions, in spite of the fact that his friends' support and sympathy were now his only comfort, Bernard continued perversely to nourish, along with his quite genuine affection, a secret grievance against the savage. To meditate a campaign of small revenges to be wreaked upon him. Nourishing a grievance against the ARC community songster was useless. There was no possibility of being revenged on the chief bottler or the assistant predestinator. As a victim, the savage possessed, for Bernard, this enormous superiority over the others. He was accessible. One of the principal functions of a friend is to suffer, in a milder and symbolic form, the punishments that we would like, but are unable to inflict upon our enemies. Bernard's other victim friend was Helmholtz. When discomfited, he came and asked once more for the friendship, which in his prosperity he had not thought it worth his while to preserve. Helmholtz gave it, and gave it without reproach, without a comment, as though he had forgotten that there had ever been a quarrel. Touched, Bernard felt himself at the same time humiliated by this magnanimity, a magnanimity which the more extraordinary and therefore the more humiliating in that it owed nothing to Soma and everything to Helmholtz's character. It was the Helmholtz of daily life who forgot and forgave, not the Helmholtz of a half-gram holiday. Bernard was duly grateful. It was an enormous comfort to have his friend again, and also duly resentful. It would be pleasure to take some revenge on Helmholtz for his generosity. At their first meeting after the estrangement, Bernard poured out the tale of his miseries and accepted consolation. It was not till some days later that he learned, to his surprise, and with a twinge of shame, that he was not the only one who had been in trouble. Helmholtz had also come into conflict with authority. It was over some rhymes, he explained. I was giving my usual course on advanced emotional engineering for third-year students. 12 lectures, of which the 7th is about rhymes. On the use of rhymes in moral propaganda and advertisement, to be precise. I always illustrate my lectures with a lot of technical examples. This time I thought I'd give them one I'd written myself. Pure madness, of course, but I couldn't resist it. He laughed. I was curious to see what their reactions would be. Besides, he added more gravely, I wanted to do a bit of propaganda. I was trying to engineer them into feeling as I'd felt when I wrote the rhymes. Ford. He laughed again. What an outcry there was. The principal had me up and threatened to hand me the immediate sack. I'm a marked man. But what were your rhymes? Bernard asked. Well, they were about being alone. Bernard's eyebrows went up. I'll recite them to you if you like. And Helmholtz began. Good evening, cult leader. Yesterday's committee. Sticks but a broken drum. Midnight in the city. Flutes in a vacuum. Shut lips, sleeping faces. Every stopped machine. The dumb and littered places where the crowds have been. All silences rejoice. Weep, loudly or low. Speak, but with the voice of whom I do not know. Absence, say of Susan's, absence of Egeria's, arms and respective bosoms, lips and posteriors, slowly form a presence, whose, and I ask of what, so absurd an essence, that something which is not, nevertheless should populate empty night more solidly than that with which we copulate. Why should it seem so squalidly? Well, I gave them that as an example, and they reported me to the principal. Alright, I hope this is a good spot for me to go to the bathroom. Well, I gave them that as an example, and they reported me to the principal. I'm not surprised, said Bernard. It's flatly against all their sleep teaching. Remember, they've had at least 250,000 warnings about solitude. I know, but I thought I'd like to see what the effect would be. Well, you've seen it now. I'll be right back.